importance of education. And we need to do something else that I feel very strongly about, which is reforming our drug laws in this country. 3% of our population is in the criminal justice system. That's 7 times the rate of Canada and 5 times the rate of most developed countries. And it's because of our ridiculous drug laws. We should be treating drug addiction as a health problem and not as a crime. And there's an organization called LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. I completely support their plan to change our drug laws. You can read about it on my website. I have a 30-minute TV show about drug law policy. I have a TV show that runs into every home in Connecticut on public access. It's been going on for a year. I have sponsors in all 35 public access stations in the state. And every month I spend 30 minutes talking about solutions to different problems. So I have a 30-minute show on drug law policy. You can watch it on YouTube. You can watch my other shows on YouTube as well. There's a lot of really smart people out there who have figured out the solutions to the myriad problems that we face. And none of them are being implemented by our career politicians. And they don't even talk about the problems. When's the last time you heard a candidate for office talking about the war on drugs and how it's failed?
Actually, it was the Green Party candidate running for governor 4 years ago.
Cliff Thornton.
Right.
That's right. There's a great book called Ending the War on Drugs. It was written in 1989 by a conservative Republican, Dirk Chase Eldridge, who actually campaigned for Ronald Reagan. It's a wonderful book. Everybody should read it. It should be required reading for every member in Congress.
How do you feel about the health care reform? Do you take the more progressive point of view that universal health care is the only answer?
No. Well, everyone should have coverage, but the term universal health care has connotations that I don't necessarily support. I also have a 30-minute show on healthcare that you can watch on YouTube. There's been a lot of misinformation out there. People think that there's 2 options, what we have currently in the United States and socialized medicine. That's not true. In fact, even in the United States, we have 3 very different systems. We have, and I'll talk about this a little bit. What Canada has is kind of like Medicare, which we have here in the United States. What Great Britain has is like the veterans' health insurance here in the United States, the VFW coverage. What France and Germany has is very different than either of those, and that's the model that we should move towards. It's called the Bismarck system. They have private healthcare providers. They have private nonprofit insurance companies. In the United States, we spend more than $7,000 per person for healthcare. We have about 85% coverage. In France, they spend $3,000 per person. They have 100% coverage. And by every objective study, they have better healthcare outcomes than we do.
So the current healthcare reform measure that was approved, you keep it, you change it, you
try to change it significantly. It did some very good and necessary things. It prevents the abuses that the insurance companies have been doing for years. For example, the woman that came down with breast cancer and needed treatment or she was going to die, and they dropped her coverage because she had acne when she first enrolled in the insurance program. You know, there's many documented cases of abuse by insurance companies of people who had health insurance. And so the health care bill closes those problems up, and it does increase coverage. It's a terribly written bill, awful. And in fact, it was written by the 35,000 lobbyists in Washington, D.C. This is our biggest problem, corporate ownership of our government. We need to take the money out of politics and keep it simple. Pass some simple pieces of legislation that do good things, piecemeal. The health care bill transfers hundreds of billions of dollars of private and public money to private insurance companies, for-profit insurance companies. It's not their fault that they're for-profit, but companies that are for-profit have one guiding principle: increase profit to their stockholders and increase the price of their stock. That's not the way health insurance should be delivered. So I favor moving towards the kind of system that they have in France and England, where, you know, again, I talk about it for 30 minutes, and that's not even enough time to talk about it. There's a great book called The Healing of America by T.R. Reid, R-E-I-D, who talks about all these different kinds of health insurance systems around the world. I learned, most of what's in my show, I learned from that book. That should also be required reading for everybody in Congress. Like I said, there's a lot of really smart people out there, and there's a lot of misinformation by special interests who stand to profit by controlling the information and the legislation that gets passed.
I mean, you're aware that right now Washington is useless because of the partisanship.
That's right.
In the bitter political
Absolutely,
partisanship. It's impossible.
absolutely. Especially the US Senate, which is a shame, because it used to be the one bastion of reason.
But, I mean, they couldn't get the cap and trade bill, which Kerry, Lieberman, and to a certain degree, Graham from South Carolina was part of
Right.
in first
Right.
developing. They couldn't get that passed, which by most observers say that that was the best proposal of any that was put forth trying to conserve
Right.
greenhouse gases.
Which, by the way, I have a much better solution than that.
Right, but don't ask, don't tell.
Oh, I know, that was appalling.
That failed. The whole issue on the Bush tax cuts now getting pushed off to that. So how does Senator Mertens go down to Washington, take the Senate floor as an independent or
Right.
Connecticut
That's right.
for Lieberman
That's
candidate,
right.
and look at your other 99 colleagues and say, guys, we're not doing it right. Let me show you how it's done.
It's amazing that you brought this up, because I've been saying this for months. My first 100 days, if I were elected, I would have lunch or dinner or coffee with all 99 senators, one-on-one. And I would move them. They're human beings, they're Americans. For example, this 30% rule, I guarantee you that if I got to spend an hour or two with somebody and tell them about this 30% rule, everybody I've talked to about it supports it. Bono, the singer for U2, remember what he did a few years ago? There was a very conservative right-wing Republican senator, and Bono was fighting for changes in international aid that he was passionate about, and the senator opposed it. He spent a lot of time with him as a human being. He got him to come to a U2 concert. He moved him on the issue, and he made him a supporter of that issue. It's this kind of human interaction using common sense problem solving that can make a difference.
You don't think the lines in the sand have been drawn so deep at this point that it's almost impossible to convince people to come off their position?
Well, here's the problem. You can get somebody in person to agree with you, but then the 35,000 lobbyists move in. The lobbyists for the banking industry moves in, and they say, oh, no, that 30% rule would be awful for us. Or we're not going to donate to your campaign if you support this bill. And that's where the people come in. The citizens, us. We've got to fight against corporate ownership of our government and demand that our representatives represent us, citizens, not corporations. We need a constitutional amendment that ends corporate citizenship. This recent Supreme Court ruling that says corporations are citizens and they have the right to spend as much money as they want on political advertising is a disaster. So I'm going to tell, there's a great story that was told at the Trinity College commencement ceremony this year. It was about Winston Churchill, late in life, was at an event, and they asked him to say a few words. And he stood up and he said, "Never give up. Never, 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 never." And he sat down. That's why I'm running for office. We can't give up. We've got to take the government back and make it representative of the citizens of the United States and the workers of the United States who've been killed by corporate takeover of our tax structure and by special interests who donate hundreds of millions of dollars to political campaigns. And it seems impossible. I know it does, but it's not. It's not impossible. Look at the energy of the Tea Party movement. This is where this is coming from. Look at the electorate who don't turn out to vote, because I've collected thousands of signatures this year, and I've had people sign my petition, and they'll say, "I'll sign your petition, but you know what, I don't vote anymore. It doesn't matter who I vote for. Nothing changes." Well, guess what? If we provide them with an alternative, a non-Republican, a non-Democrat, who's not owned by a political party, who is owned by corporations and special interests, we can get them energized. I'm not giving up after November. I'm not just running for U.S. Senate. I'm running to repair our democracy, and I'm committed to this.
John, we are running out of time. Any question I didn't ask very quickly in a minute or two that...
Energy policy. I'm concerned about protecting our economy in the long term. The 30% rule is another mortgage crisis I'm worried about, because it'll happen again if we don't implement something like that. And then our economy is vulnerable because we don't have a coherent national energy policy. I teach energy policy. I've got a detailed national energy policy plan on my website. We didn't get a chance to talk about that. 100 things: term limits, a constitutional amendment to end eminent domain abuse. Go to my website. I've got 30 position statements, detailed legislation that I'd fight for.
And that website, one more time?
Mertens2010.com, and I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook. Find me and vote.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us here this afternoon. We will be back on Thursday with Tom Foley, the Republican candidate for governor, and Linda McMahon, the Republican candidate for U.S. Senate, will be with us next Tuesday. We'll be advertising that in the paper and on the website. Have a good afternoon.